From the studios of Warrantech North, Jeffco Public Schools presents Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee.
This is Jeffco Public Schools Superintendent Dan McMinimee with another edition of Building Bright Futures, our podcast series designed to keep you up to date on all the great happenings within one of the largest school districts in the state of Colorado and the country. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. Our goal here is pretty simple. We want to provide you with interesting content about our schools, teachers, and students, and programs that we hope will enlighten, educate, and even delight. Joining me today is Greg Jackson, Executive Director of Transportation and Fleet Services. Greg, thanks for taking the time to join us in the studio.
Thank you, Dan, for the invite.
Mr. Jackson, you have a big job in a 700 square mile district with 86,000 students, mountains, dirt roads, highways, urban roads, and suburban cul-de-sacs. Can you give us an idea about the magnitude of your job?
Well, every day we're running 200 and pretty much 65 routes we're running a day, and that's not even including some of the temp routes. We have 360 buses in our fleet, but and those backup buses are our spare buses for athletics and routes. So every day, again, it's where our guys are getting in there around 5 o'clock in the morning on snow mornings, even earlier than that. And they're getting up there and they're going in and they're preparing their buses, doing safety checks. You know, again, a state law and federal law pre-trip, just like you do on the airplane. You're going to go out and you're going to check these buses, make sure that they're ready to go. And then two, they're going to get out there, have a split shift where they're going to get out there in the morning time from 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, returning around 9:30, have that little break time in the middle, or fulfilling some of the midday things that we have to do in the midday, and then coming back in the afternoon to take the students home. And so, again, they're preparing these buses, make sure they're safe. We got mechanics who are working on these buses continuously to make sure we have safe and road-ready vehicles. Staying within also CDE and federal regulations to maintain, which is another thing, is these guys got to maintain their license. And these licenses is something where, again, with a CDL license, you got to do random drug tests. You got to do physicals every 2 years to make sure you're in compliance and actually able to do the job. But again, on a day-to-day, these guys we're running pretty much the equivalent from when I did a calculation is we're driving back and forth to the United States from coast to coast twice within a school year is how much we're driving.
That's amazing. That's a lot of miles. A lot of challenging miles too, I'm sure. So I know one of the questions that we always get is we don't have one bus for one route. We do what's called bus tiering. Can you give us a little information about what is bus tiering?
Bus tiering is where the ideal for bus tiering is we be able to service 3 schools, where you're having a bus connected to schools that are all in the same general area. Geographic is what you hope, but most times we got buses scattered all over the district. So what we try to do is make sure that, one, if we have a bus that's picking up the high school first, then you go to the middle school, you go to the elementary school. Some districts are different where it's just however it works. Your high schools are usually the first ones in, middle schools are usually your second one in, but here in this district we have kind of a jumble. So our tiering right now is route 2. 2 is where it's ideal, but we would love to be at some point to be at 3 tiers. And then what it is that we have a lot of principals who think that we have one bus for one school, but no, we service multiple schools at one time in one bus, just to be efficient is what the whole focus is.
So I'd like to shift gears here a little bit and talk about inclement weather. With the snows approaching in Colorado, we all know that there's going to be some challenging drives that are going to be a part of that. What factors impact whether the buses run or not?
Well, what the biggest impact is making sure that, one, we can, if we receive information in advance, where most of the times we do from the weather company that provides us pretty much very accurate information compared to some of our local news channels, we start to prepare by chaining up the buses. We make sure that the buses are ready to go, plugging these buses in every night. We're trying to make sure that we are, on a transportation level, we have the staff and these folks are going to be in and ready to go, and making it as easy as possible for them when they walk in. Again, with the chain bus, with the bus plugged in, where it's going to give us a good chance where, one, it keeps your engine warm, it's keeping some components warm versus when you're looking at sub-degree weather. We want to make sure that those buses are up and ready to go. If we have buses that are not plugged in, then we're going to have a situation where it's not going to start. So our mechanics, they're in earlier than most of our drivers because they want to make sure we get these buses started. And sometimes we run the buses and get them started around 3 o'clock in the morning, just because we want to make sure these buses are ready to go, they're warm, and when the drivers come in and get on these buses, they can go. Factors also is looking at what conditions are, because we're such a large district. We have mountain areas that we have to look at versus the flatland areas, which is the city urban areas, and looking at that combination. A lot of communication with you, Dan, and a lot of communication with a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I know that part of that discussion is also how quickly the roads are getting cleared by the different cities that we have, because we interface with 7 different cities. I know that Jefferson County, the county itself, has their own snow removal equipment as well. And, the worst thing would be for us to be out on the road and be in the way of that snow removal equipment. So there is a huge coordination that has to happen there. Can you tell me a little bit about when bad weather occurs, why is it that sometimes the buses are late?
Well, what happens is, one thing is we always start our folks to get in 15 minutes early. The ideal is that if they get in 15 minutes early, they can do a pre-trip. They can make sure that if they have any kind of mechanical situations or setbacks, they can get started. Our goal is to get to your first stop on time. One thing we cannot control is, and a lot of times that a lot of folks don't understand, is it's traffic. Once we get out into traffic, we can't control that. So I know a lot of parents get very upset that buses are not there on time when the bus gets to, like, again, their second tier, as we just spoke about tiers. First tier is always great success. Traffic is light at that time, but when we have inclement weather, more traffic is starting earlier, and then those buses are trapped within that. So as they're rolling, if we had jetpacks, that'd be great. We can put some jetpacks, we can fly over this traffic, but unfortunately those drivers got to play in the same traffic that parents are going to work with. And again, what we always want to tell parents is communicate to the terminals. So if you don't have the terminal numbers, please go to the website, grab those phone numbers when the weather starts to get cold, because they're going to be your best resources to give you information on where that bus is located and give you approximate times. Now that we have our GPS intact, it helps us a lot to kind of really see what's going on with this bus. So when that parent calls us versus calling the school most of the times they're not going to know where that is, and now you're going to have a backlog on trying to get that information. So just call us at the terminals. There's 4 locations. They'll be more than happy to work with you to try to get you some information. But it's always about traffic, and sometimes the conditions where if an accident happened, that's even worse. So these drivers are trying to do as much as they can to maneuver to get around to pick up your children. We don't want your children in those conditions, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure we're picking them up.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Greg Jackson.
Hi, I'm Allison McKenzie, and I'm a teacher at Warren Tech Transition Services. Warren Tech Transition Services is excited to announce our landscaping crew is in its 2nd year and is expanding to high school juniors, seniors, and 18 to 21-year-old transition students. This crew is designed for students to explore and gain skills in growing and caring for plants, both edible and non-edible, using garden tools safely, and basic landscape design. Students will also be introduced to native plants, irrigation, composting, and using organic materials to feed the plants and soil. This program will better prepare students with basic entry-level skills for the workforce in the areas of horticulture and landscaping. Fundraisers include selling poinsettias at the holiday time and hosting a farmer's market in the spring. Students will have the opportunity to design and plant their own garden and continue to improve the landscape on the Warren Tech grounds. Transition Services students and staff work in partnership with the STEM and culinary programs at Warren Tech Central. The landscaping crew has received abundant support from the various businesses in the community, such as Home Depot, Squeaky Bean, American Furniture Warehouse, and Jensen's Nursery. This fall, CPS Distributors is donating their manpower, materials, and knowledge to build a sprinkler system in the space behind the Transition Services building. Throughout the year, the students are able to continue to grow plants both outside and during the cold months inside the greenhouses at the center. Our future plans include volunteering in the community and expanding our partnerships with the STEM and culinary programs at Warren Tech Central. We hope you take time to check out our programs.
Jeffco Public Schools, building bright futures.
Most important thing is safety, and so the second in that case would be being on time. But we always, I'm sure, radio ahead to the building and go, "Hey, bus 27."
Safety over schedule.
That's right.
That's what we preach: is safety over schedule.
And we let the buildings know as we can, and so it is a big communication challenge, and there are a lot of factors that we can't control for sure. We'd like to talk a little bit about department operations, meaning we know that bus drivers undergo a lot of training. Can you give us an idea of that training for all of our bus drivers that happens?
Well, when a bus driver when they first even come into the position, this district and many other districts, we do background checks. We have to do that, whereas the CBI background check and also we make sure we have a clearance where these folks are here in a position to be able to do the job. And most of these folks are dedicated, not most, but all of them are dedicated to our students. 2, they have to go through a 3 weeks to 4 week training, which is state required, to go forth on being able to, drive a bus, which a lot of times a lot of our people who are drivers have never been behind a big bus before. They've been around behind their wheel of their car and think it's the same thing, but trust me, I've never been a driver, but when I do get behind the wheel, this is not a fun time. But again, it's one of those situations where they go through that training. They have to get that license. They have to get a permit before they get the license. They have to be able to, go through random drug tests, which is required by the federal law. But as they get out on the day-to-day, they have to do a post-trip, a pre-trip, and a safety check. The pre-trip is where they have to go and make sure the brakes, and make sure we don't have any air leaks in our brakes because we have air brakes. We got to make sure that we also are running into looking at everything that is required by federal and state that are safety factors, which is headlights. It's also the tread of your tires, making sure you have no exhaust leaks or anything that's happening. They want to make sure that bus is road ready and safe. If it's not road ready and safe, we have to down that bus. So then that driver has to go grab another bus, go through the whole process again. Once we're on the road, it's just doing a lot of the basic where they're required to look at their mirrors almost every 30 seconds because of bus and the size and also the blind spots. They have to be aware of their surroundings. At the same time, looking at the kiddos and managing them on the bus.
That was my next question is, while you're doing all that, you're also trying to manage a busload of kids. Mm-hmm. So, anywhere from 50 to 60 students on those buses at any one time. So how does a bus driver go about doing that?
Well, we do a lot of training with our drivers. And again, most of the times our drivers have double the classroom than what an average teacher would have but they have the students, as they say, as the teachers always say, never have turn your back to your students, but they have to turn their back to the students and use a mirror to be their monitor. But in many ways is that they start building relationships with their students on the first day. A lot of your drivers are really vested to their students and get to know them. And once they get to know their students and understands the behaviors or what's the needs of this student and the need of that student, it comes into a situation where they start to build that rapport. A lot of times we don't really understand that the driver is a big factor in a part of really making that connection with these kids. And they love it, because they can tell you where this kid, what days they're going to be there or what works better for them, which seat's better for them in that type of situation. But they manage it because we do a lot of training also. We do a lot of follow-up training. We do in-services throughout the year. When we start getting feedback on when we look at certain behaviors or certain actions that are happening on a bus, we have a training team and a lead trainer at each terminal that will come together and create and build a really great training program to just refresh folks. Folks can get content over a while, but we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure people are ready, they're safe, they're prepared, and also be able to manage our kids. Have an open dialogue with our students versus just having, I'm driving a bus. Well, that's the old ancient way of driving a bus.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things people need to know is bus drivers have a tremendous responsibility. They're the first person a kid sees in the morning. They can set the tone for the day. And they're the last person from our district that student sees as they get off the bus. They can set the tone for the conversation at the dinner table. So
true,
I think
true.
Our bus drivers know that and respect that power that they have and genuinely try to make sure they have great relationships with kids.
True.
I want to talk a little bit about driver shortages. Seen in the news lately that there's driver shortages. I think this is a nationwide problem, bus driver shortages. So what are some of the factors that play a role in that issue?
Right now, and what's the biggest factor is the economy. One thing that if you spoke with any other district director, they're going through the same pains as we are right now. We can't hire. When the economy improves, then we have hard times where people are going hard times hiring because people are going back to the positions or jobs in which they had specialties in, or that's what they went to school for. Bus driving in many cases has always been a position where people use it as a transition position. So when the economy is going downhill, a lot of times these folks will come and be bus drivers because they need to pay the bills. So they will come here, drive, and then again, they will go back to their jobs once they have an opportunity. I was told that by an old colleague many years ago and never believed it until experiencing it. It was, again, we see this improvement. But then the other part of it is that it's not just here in Jeffco. Every district around the state right now is going through these same pains. And then I went to an actual national symposium just a couple of months ago, and it's a national problem. We had roundtables discussing the same thing. And in many cases, it was the whole factor of how do we reach a population. Our demographic is a very specific demographic. We have folks there from the age of 21 to 25, and if those individuals enjoy driving, they stick with it, or they find ways to be able to move up and grow within a school district. And then we have the next demographic, 55 on to around 75, retired positions. They don't want to stick around. Our focus is that in between. How do we get those folks here and motivated?
So what are some of the things that we're trying to do to make these positions more attractive?
Well, one thing we did was we had a big focus on the market comparison to raise our income, our hourly rate for our folks. Last year, we were second to the bottom when it came down to what we paid our sub drivers to come in. So we worked with you and cabinet and my boss was Steve Bell to try to find in human resources to do a market analysis and be able to bring that pay up. Last year we was number 3. We kind of dropped by 1 point because someone got a little bit. They didn't want Jeffco to outdo them, so they kind of jumped up a couple of pennies more to kind of beat us. But we moved up our pay, and so now we're hiring our folks at $15.05. Which is a little bit more attractive than what we were at last year, and so it has helped us too. Where we collaborated with some other departments that had some struggles, which is food service and custodial services, and we started doing some bus marketing where we did some advertisement on our buses. And right now we already have, and it's kind of funny because, I communicated earlier, we had 4 people who responded to this. But then as I went in and spoke to one of my area directors, she said she got a call that morning from a person who saw the bumper stickers on the back of the bus, which was just a trial for us to see if it would be successful. 5 drivers who were giving you communications back and having 4 of those individuals in a current class is a success. We were approached by radio, but for what the cost was, it was an unknown. What we would receive back from that. And we just didn't want to take that chance. Speaking to other districts, they're going around that route, but they're going at it a different manner. They have some other buy-in to help them to be able to support that. But I want to see how these guys do. If it's successful, great. But right now, we would do more of a local where we're putting bus advertisements on our buses that go to long distances, that we're reaching out not just to Jeffco, but to the Denver Metro also.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I have one last question for you. I'm looking for a great answer here. I'm sure I'm going to get it. What is the one thing you'd like parents to know when interacting with school bus drivers?
Well, parents, one thing that we always ask is that with the drivers, these guys got a lot going on, So it's a lot of times where we know that emotions get involved because it's our kids that your kids we're transporting, but again, these drivers, these are their kids too. They really value the safety, they value the relationships, and again, these folks are professionals in what they do. They have to hold a license that everybody else don't have the I guess they don't have to get criticized so much with the license that they carry. They have a CDL license, a commercial driver's license, which has a lot of restrictions behind it, a lot of things that they have to maintain. Medically, they got to maintain their health all the way, all the time. Even me, I got to carry one. But at the same time, they have physical responsibilities that they have to do, but they're so dedicated to your kids. I've heard so many stories of where we have the compassion that a driver has for our students, and those are the small things that we hear. But again, the drivers, the only thing they ask for is just they're there. They'll be there every morning. They will do everything they can to be there on time. We're not going to get there on time every time because we're about safety and not schedule.
Well, I really appreciate the professionalism of the drivers, and I think they do truly know that they are a huge part of what we do in the total education of our students. So I appreciate you being here with us today. It's been a pleasure to have a chance to ask you some questions. From the spacious studio here at Warren Tech North, this is Dan McMinimee, and that is it for this edition of Building Bright Futures. A special thank you to our Warren Tech audio student Hollis Pierman for engineering today's episode. Don't forget that you can catch our podcast in several different ways: on iTunes, on JPS-TV, on our official Jeffco YouTube channel, and on the Jeffco Public Schools website. Drop me a line and let me know what you think of the podcast, or if you'd like to see a specific topic covered. Let's build some bright futures together.
You've been listening to Building Bright Futures, a Jeffco podcast with Superintendent Dan McMinimee. This is a production of Jeffco Public Schools.